On today's show, we're thrilled to introduce our newest investment counselor at RealWealth. Stacey Stegenga has built an impressive real estate portfolio, and today she's sharing her journey from Army nurse to real estate investor. I'm Kathy Fedke, and welcome to the RealWealth Show.
You're listening to the RealWealth Show with Kathy Fedke, the real estate investor's resource.
In this episode, you'll hear how Stacey overcame analysis paralysis to buy her first investment property, how she scaled her portfolio, and then navigated the challenges that came with that growth. And be sure to stick around until the end. Stacey reveals how she's built a resilient real estate portfolio in Florida despite rising property taxes, soaring interest rates, and the ever-present risk of hurricanes. Stacey, welcome to the RealWealth Show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Oh, we're so excited. We just had our live event in January where you were there, and we had so many people coming up to us saying, who is she and how did you find her? What a great addition to RealWealth because of your experience.
Yeah, it's my pleasure.
But before we get into your real estate experience and how you're able to coach so many RealWealth members for free, I might add, for those of you who don't know, you can have access to an investment counselor. If you join RealWealth, it's free to join at realwealth.com. But Stacey, let's talk about your profession before you discovered real estate. What were you doing?
Yeah, so I actually joined the military when I was 17, and I served on active duty for 8 years, but I was feeling very unfulfilled in my role. So I actually separated and became a nurse and then came back into the military. So I got to do flight nursing for the military, but I was a reservist. So then I worked on the civilian side in critical care in various hospitals across the nation.
Wow. So that's incredible. Thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Yeah. And so then what got you into real estate from the military or during the military?
Yeah. So the biggest thing is that in civilian healthcare, healthcare professionals are just overworked and underpaid. And I know that's a lot of people in America, but it's to the point where we aren't getting bathroom breaks. We don't get to eat lunch, any food. Working in critical care, I mean, you have people's lives in your hands. And so when you're working that hard and then being underpaid and treated so poorly on the job, it just really compounds. So I was experiencing a lot of burnout, and I moved to Colorado to be closer to my family, which was amazing. But then my income cut even further in half because Colorado, not further in half, it cut in half. Colorado is one of the states that's the lowest paying for healthcare professionals, according to the cost of living. So it was that pain point that I was like, this is not going to work. And I was way too burnt out to keep picking up overtime. So that's when I found Set for Life, Scott Trench's book. And it just totally changed my perspective that we're doing the American dream all wrong. And then I went down the real estate rabbit hole and became an investor 2 years later.
What was the highlight you got from the book?
Yeah, just that, like, both with our job, that we're basically strapping ourselves, like imprisoning ourselves, because we buy these like luxury homes that we live in and they're not making you any money. So they're a liability and not an asset. And just how we do that and everything in our life, the luxury items, the cars, the fancy everything. And we're just trying to keep up with the Joneses, and it sets us up for failure. And so by getting income producing assets, you buy yourself freedom. And that really spoke to me because freedom is a really important core value of mine.
Okay, so young men out there, please hear what Stacey just said, because I know the first acquisition y'all want to do is to buy a car, in a luxury car. Yeah. I've seen it over and over again. It's not just men, women too, but
yeah, I was going to say I was guilty. I was guilty too. Yeah.
Yeah. And then so what does that do when you're not wealthy yet, but you're buying a car a wealthy person would drive?
You're just furthering putting yourself back because you can't invest and you're not making additional money. And so then you keep working overtime and you're burnt out, and you're all doing that just to afford your lifestyle. And so it just really sets you up for failure. And investing is truly the best way to go to be able to afford the luxuries in life and be able to live a life on your terms in the way that you want. That's the most important thing. Everybody thinks we're doing this for the rich and the fame and the glam. But for me, it's just to be able to live life the way that I want.
Yeah, get off the treadmill.
Yeah.
Rich was lucky when he was young, probably 19 years old, and he was cleaning windows at the time, and the owner had a Lamborghini or something, or a Porsche, and Rich was like, "Oh, that's my dream car." And Rich said, "How much are the monthly payments for that?" And the owner said, "If you have to get a loan for this, you shouldn't have this car. You should be able to pay for it out of your investments."
Yep.
So that was great advice.
Yeah.
What was it about real estate that had you want to invest your time and money into that?
Yeah. So I think it just made sense as like a physical, tangible asset. But I will say my brother probably had some influence on it because he's actually a commodity trader. And so I heard him for so many years talking about the stock market and this and that. And he was just so intelligent and taking all these tests that they have to take to be able to trade. And I would just see him obsessing, watching the markets. And I'm like, man, this guy is brilliant. And he can't even figure this out. And like nobody really can, right? It's outside of our control. And so the real estate market and cycles just made way more sense to me. You can truly weather any storm, I feel, in real estate, as long as you're able to hold the asset through that market cycle. And so that just felt way more secure to me. And then in addition to that, the tangible asset. And so yeah, I just fell in love and it all made sense. And here I am.
Isn't it an amazing moment when you see that, when you see the path forward, that, wow, if I just do this, this, and this, I will get this. And we've eliminated a lot of the risk that you might find in other things. I couldn't agree more. My roommate in my late 20s was a day trader. And, on some days he'd wake up and be like, oh, I made so much money. And the next day he could barely get out of bed because he lost it all. And I just thought that's no way to do it.
Yeah, it's a roller coaster. Absolutely.
Yeah. So real estate could be a roller coaster too if you don't know what you're doing. So how did you jump in and do your first deal? Did you have money saved? How did you get your first deal?
Yeah. So first, I did a ton of self-education. So all the free podcasts and just listening and watching webinars and any resource I could get my hands on. I will say my biggest fault is that I waited too long because while I was learning, I was picking up all of that overtime at the hospital and all the extra call shifts. So I was working so hard to save it that it became this like pain point in the path where I was terrified to lose all this money that I had worked so hard to save. And the biggest thing too, I want to add that I moved into a house hack. So it wasn't a home that I owned. I was a renter. But cutting down those major expenses like cost of living and your rent was what allowed me to save 25 grand, I think is what I did. That's Scott Trench's runway in the book. And so I was able to save that in 1 year. And that's what I put down on my first property.
That is such great advice. Rich and I did that too. We would always rent out a room. We'd somehow make it separate. Like when we were renting houses, we tried to find a house that had a separate entrance to a bedroom that we could just block off and not actually share space. I didn't want to share my kitchen with anyone. Is that what you did too?
No, actually, I did the opposite. And it's just so funny because being in the military, I hadn't had a roommate in my adult life, literally since I was 17. And here I am 30 something and I move into a house hack and I had 4 other roommates. And I was quite older than them as well, but it actually ended up being completely an amazing experience. I loved it. And so I highly recommend it to anybody because it really helps you get that nest egg to invest and it'll change your life.
And what you said earlier is so true for so many people. It's like you're working so hard, these overtime hours and weekend jobs to save that down payment. You don't want to make a mistake. So how did you jump in with, in spite of that fear?
Yeah, so I did end up getting a mentor, not a paid coaching, but just somebody that had what I wanted. So I started leaning on them. And the biggest thing that they helped me realize is that I was initially going to buy a house hack for myself in Denver. And hearing all of my pain in healthcare, they're like, you're looking for cash flow so that you can replace your income. You're not wanting to invest in an appreciation market. So it was through their guidance that helped me realize that Florida was going to be the best place for me. I was actually a ER nurse in Florida, so I knew the neighborhoods very well. And I was able to kind of put the knowledge together with the market and my nursing knowledge, and then bought right on the path of progression. And it worked out tremendously because my property value did double in the first year.
Oh man, yeah, the timing was pretty phenomenal. What did you buy in 2021?
Yes. Yep, 2020. So yes, it was absolutely. I didn't realize at the time how lucky that timing was, but I do appreciate it now.
Yeah, you got in with those low rates, and the market was kind of frozen, so you could get low prices, and then bam, it took off.
Yeah.
So how much did you have to put down, and what did you end up buying?
Yeah, so I bought a duplex, which is required to put 25% down as an investment property. My initial purchase price was 165, I believe, and so it was around 50K that I put down on that first duplex.
Okay. And how were you able to then buy more, since sounds like you might have used up all your savings for that first acquisition?
Yeah. So I was actually deployed for the military for COVID. And because I make exponentially more money for them in that type of deployment tasking, I was able to save more money. But then I additionally didn't spend any of the cash flow that my property was making because I was still working full time. And so it was between reinvesting that and then putting down everything that I was saving from the deployment and then being in that house hack that it just continued to compound and I was able to get my next investment.
And you were able to buy 2 more duplexes?
So I bought 4 total in 18 months, right back to back. And it was mostly all from reinvesting that cash flow, continuing to save, continuing to live in frugality. At one point, I did realize that my reserves for my properties was quite significant. And this is truly depending on people's risk tolerance. So use your own discretion, but I did shave that down because they were all doing so well and I didn't have any CapEx at the time. And so I was able to just continue reinvesting that and shave down some of my reserves.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, so what we recommend at RealWealth is at least 6 months reserves set aside. That's basically rental income that you would have that set aside. If you want to be ultra conservative, I would have a year set aside. Yeah. But like you said, that's money sitting there unless you can maybe invest it in a CD or treasury or something that you can get back. That's just money sitting that could be put to use, which is what you did.
But also crucial because as we start talking about my 4th property, I will say reserves is hands down what saved me. It could have absolutely destroyed my entire portfolio. So I recommend to everybody, make sure you have the reserves that are right for you and your risk tolerance because they definitely can save your investments if something goes wrong.
Yeah, most people don't bat 100% as they invest. It's not always winners. So your 4th property was a loser. What happened there?
Yeah, so unfortunately, it was flipped. And I was buying it from the flipper. So it was supposed to be turnkey when I was purchasing it. And I had a home inspection done. But I will say the first thing that I will recommend is understand what kind of licensing requirements professionals and vendors of all types, GCs, home inspectors, everybody that you encounter, what type of licensing requirements they have in the state. I was heavily relying on my home inspector because I bought all of my properties sight unseen. At the time, that was totally fine because I didn't know better. If I had gone to the property, I was not going to spot any issues. But my home inspector didn't catch any of the fraudulent work the flipper had done. And basically, all of the major systems of the property were done completely incorrectly and they were non-functioning. So at closing, I went to actually sign and I was so excited, I'm going to be at my first closing. And so I go and I stay at the property and the first thing I notice immediately, the AC isn't working and it's in Florida. So I'm like, OMG. Turns out it wasn't even connected, not even the condenser or the ducting.
Wow.
And then it just compounded after that. And I didn't feel comfortable letting a tenant stay in a property that could be so unsafe because there were electrical issues, there were plumbing issues, sewage was backing into the home, and it had all brand new plumbing allegedly. Turns out they did it on a reverse slope. And so it was going against gravity. So you name it. But I had to take it down to the studs and basically redo the entire flip, which caused me to lose 6 figures. It was very, very painful.
Oh, that's awful. Were you able to sue them?
So I tried, and that's another huge lesson that I learned. Seller non-disclosure is actually one of the hardest things to legally prove, because you have to have physical evidence that they were at the property and aware of the work that was being done to the quality it was being done. And that can be extremely difficult. So that's honestly one of my favorite things about working at RealWealth, because we have all of these property teams and there's so many people that are on your side. It was so hard and so painful for me to go through that alone. And I had nobody to turn to, nobody to ask questions, no guidance, nobody. And so it's just really one of my favorite things that in RealWealth, it's a community and you have so much support and backing.
Yeah, I mean, there have been teams that we've worked with in the past that, that didn't get permits and didn't do the work, the quality work. And we've learned a lot over the years that turnkey means absolutely nothing. There is no definition of turnkey. Was this through a company that was calling themselves a turnkey company?
No, it was just the flipper that did it himself and then posted it on the MLS. And I was unfortunately the person that suffered.
Yeah, it's the nice thing now at RealWealth is that we've been worked with these teams for a decade. In some cases, some are newer, but when you have the pressure of a big company like RealWealth to say, look, if you don't take care of our members, we know how to help them go after you. We know how to help them look for what they need to see, and also I have a loud mouth. So, we're going to let the world know, if they're a company that's not treating people well.
Yes, absolutely. And you have to do that.
Yeah. Well, now that you have several years experience as an investor, looking back, is there anything you would have done differently?
Yeah, I would say just make sure you're always underwriting and looking at the numbers, make sure the numbers make sense. And then I would say that another big thing for me right now is I bought all of my properties within a 2-mile radius of each other. And last year, after the storms and all the hurricanes that Florida had, that definitely felt a little risky to me, having them so condensed. So definitely Florida's an amazing market, but I would definitely spread them out into different locations so that if you do suffer from any loss of a storm, it's not all of your properties all at once.
Such great advice, especially in Florida or California. There was one time when we had 3 properties on one street when the fires came through in California. And I was like, I teach this stuff. What am I doing? Of course, diversification is the key. Don't have 3 properties on one street where there's natural disasters bound to happen.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So great advice. And so speaking of Tampa, a lot of people are afraid to invest in Florida because of the storms and because of the increased insurance rates there. What are you experiencing?
Yeah, so the insurance issue is very much a very big pain point in Florida, and it's real, and it happened actually because of fraud, not because of storms, which is what most of the public in the nation thinks. So I spend a lot of time talking to the experts in that industry. So I talk to all these insurance brokers to understand where is this really coming from and what can I do to make it better. So I actually had, and it moves a little bit depending on the insurance company and what they're most passionate about. But the insurance company that I got my policies through, they were super passionate about having secondary water resistance because that's what they paid out the most claims for. And so when you're able to avoid that, they can give you a lower policy. So I had my roofs changed. I got the hurricane straps and a third nail, which is not an extreme cost outside of the roof change is obviously expensive. But the hurricane straps and the third nail, I think was only like $1,000 or something more. And then I had that secondary water resistance installed. And I was able to literally get my policies from $3,000 back down to like $1,200. So it's definitely something that you can mitigate. I just encourage people to ask their insurance company, like, what is their pain point and what are they struggling with in the payouts? And then you can accommodate whatever they need and get that policy back down to normal.
Wow, that is gold. I can't believe I haven't heard that before. We haven't had any issues with one of our properties in Florida because it's newer, so it's probably up to those standards. And we really have not seen insurance rates go up on that property. But we also have an older one, and we haven't done any of the things you just said, but the insurance rates haven't really gone up. So nice. I don't know. And that one's in St. Petersburg, where it was the heart of the storm.
Yes, I know. Goodness. I'm so happy for you.
Yeah, it's crazy. So that's been our experience. But I know that in general, especially if you're in Fort Myers, Sarasota, any of those areas where they just keep getting hit, we've seen insurance rates go up.
I do think another super insider tip is a lot of people focus on the flood zones from the actual ocean, but a lot of the infrastructure of the sewage systems for the city are very old and need to be updated. So there's actually, outside of FEMA, other flood maps that show you where it's most likely to back up within the city. And that was huge for me in Tampa. And it allowed me to avoid both overflow from the sewage systems or the water drainage. I might be calling it the wrong thing. Maybe it's not sewage, but it's where the water will pool and back up from the storm surge. So looking at those in addition to the flood zone from the ocean is another huge thing that will keep your insurance costs way down.
Yep. And one of the reasons why our teams in Florida make sure you're not in a flood zone and that you're protected that way. Any final thoughts for people who are just getting started and maybe on the fence and not sure and feeling the way you did when it's like, this is my hard-earned money. I want to make sure I make the right decision.
Yeah, start before you're ready. It's truly life-changing. And if I hadn't started when I did, that appreciation wouldn't have allowed me to scale the way that I did. So it definitely changed my life in a really short amount of time. And I just want everybody to experience that. So definitely join Real Wealth. Come meet me. I would love to tell you more. But yeah, sign up.
Love that. And if you are concerned about, some of the nightmare stories that Stacey talked about with her fourth property and having to put over $100,000 into it to fix it, consider buying new. If you're a new investor, get a new property. You're not going to have issues like that. And our Florida teams, that's what they excel in, is selling new properties. The insurance is lower on that. The property taxes are lower. It's a great first investment where you can get through all the fear of of making that first investment. You've eliminated a lot of the risk, and also tenants love a new place, so.
Yes. Even I want some.
I know for sure.
The maintenance costs, they can just add up, and it's just such a beauty to have a brand new property that you don't have to worry about that.
You don't have to worry about it. And we've been able to negotiate. Right now builders are kind of struggling to sell because interest rates are so high. So we've been able to negotiate rates down to 3-4% and sometimes 5%, depending on the builder, which can make these newer properties cash flow better than maybe an older one, especially if the older one has so many repairs it needs, plus you're paying the higher interest rate. So highly recommend you contact Real Wealth. Just go to realwealthshow.com. It's free to join. And when you do, you'll be able to sign up with one of our awesome investment counselors who can help you on your journey. I mean, Stacey, what would life have been like if you had that? If you had an investment counselor to help you when you were first starting?
I can't even imagine. And especially to guide you towards new construction or different markets that I hadn't considered or that I was just so nervous about. Oh, it just would have changed everything for me. And to diversify across multiple markets too. There's just so much beauty in it. And so, yeah, I still plan to reposition into some of our markets because it's just truly such a benefit.
Awesome. Well, Stacey, we're so happy to have you on board. We had several people within Real Wealth say, pick her. We had hundreds of applicants, so many really, really good qualified people, but you rose to the top there. And we're just really happy to have you on board.
Thank you. It's such an honor.
And thank you all for joining us here on the Real Wealth Show. Again, if you just go to realwealthshow.com, you can get access to a lot of the homework that we've already done for you on, which markets and which submarkets within those markets have the highest growth and the teams that we've worked with there that have property management in place. You can get access to that at realwealthshow.com. And then you can connect with Stacey when you're there.
Yes, please.
Have a wonderful day, everybody, and we'll see you next time.
The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are provided for informational purposes only and should not be construed as an offer to buy or sell any securities or to make or consider any investment or course of action. For more information, go to realwealthshow.com.